Welcome everyone, today we have a new build update for the Lightning Marksman. Now looking behind me, I'm currently testing two different set items that provide us with some pretty interesting warding gain. So let's have a look at some of the demonstration for this particular setup with over 3000 corruption. Now do keep in mind guys, this is gonna be my attempt into making a cheaper setup for the Lightning Marksman using the warding setup. And this build of course has the potential to clear up to 3000 corruption, but as you're gonna see later in the testings, I'll provide you guys with the times we failed while testing on this particular setup. Simply because you're using two cheaper rings that provide you with warding gain. And those set rings can be very cheap to be acquired, or you can find them much easier than crafting a legendary. So the defensive capacity of those rings is that you'll be gaining additional ward as you gain shock onto enemies. And for our build, this happens pretty consistently. Now as we go through the replay with the 3000 corruption maps, what you're gonna see is, yes, I'm playing much more defensive simply because the monsters hit very hard. Even if you stack tons of wood over, over 10,000 or close to 20,000 wood, you can still be one-shotted. I'm using my new setup which allows me to auto-use potions as I use Swift, which gives me more mana gain and also more mana regeneration. Together with the ability to dodge a little bit, we deal pretty sizable damage even at 3000 corruption using this much cheaper setup to gain us tons of ward. And testing the boss fights with 3000 plus corruption shades, and those by far are the harder bosses in the higher corruptions. So what you're gonna see is we'll have a super glass cannon or DPS setup that is based on dodging the first attack from the boss and then taking it down super fast. Notice I dodged the first meteorite and I took the boss down within a few seconds using this setup with Eye of Rain, which stacks tons of damage. So in a sense, the goal of this video is to provide you guys both with an alternative cheaper version of the warding game build and also to provide you guys with the updated version of the boss setup and also the combos behind it. Now you might see my game lags a lot as I was dealing damage to the boss because my computer is pretty much a potato and it's not great with all the lags with all the procs. And do be aware guys, there can be some lags with a Lightning Marksman simply because of the number of procs that is generated. Now for those of you that are interested in the testings and also the setups, make sure you come over to the replays where I was doing some additional testings with different setups using different items, and also I'll provide you guys with the instances where the build will die. This is quite important, and even though yes guys, we're testing this on offline characters, so we could be testing a lot of different items, weapons and also combinations, but there is a possibility of us dying, and this happens very frequently with over 3000 corruption. So I really want to share this particular demonstration to show you guys not only the build can work, there's many times it doesn't work. So don't say that you can just grab two set rings and push over 3000 corruptions. Yes, it will help you push over 1000 corruption. You start to die around 1500 corruption, around 2000 to 3000 corruption, you'll have a lot of chance of dying simply because there's so many ground effects, there's so much more damage with the monsters. As you can see here, we have died multiple times while testing those setups. So I think it is quite important for me to show you guys both the success and also the failure of the build, so that you guys don't misunderstand to see that the build is super powerful just with set items or with a cheaper version setup. And in comparison guys, if you're comparing the survivability of the build, the tank HP mountain setup will be more tanky. Simply because of ward gain over here, you can see I still get one-shotted. So I want to share this one with you guys at the start of the video. Now looking behind me, you can see two versions of the updated builder's guide. And here are the previous versions we had with the rings of the third eye. Now if you guys are using the third eye ring together with the Soul Gambler Fallency, it is still by far better than the set rings. Not only you still get tons of ward gain, you also gain the ability to craft additional affixes onto those items like mana regen, throwing attack mana cost reduction, and also more critical chances. In comparison, those set rings are the cheaper version of gaining more ward as you deal shock to your enemies. Those rings will have a little bit of mana regen, and those are not the major part. So if you guys have been using the previous setup, this can still work. And on the second half of the video, I'll teach you guys the rotations, how to survive with over 3000 corruption. So briefly going through the new setup, you can see that we're using 2 set rings with Invoker Static Touch. Now we're not getting the set effects on those. What we want is the chance to gain 75 ward when you hit a shock enemy. And in order to provide us with a consistent way of getting shock, you can have one of the weapons to have one of the FXs with chance of shock on hit. Now for the chances that you guys don't have this weapon crafted, it is possible to have the static shell, which I'll talk to you guys about the second variation of the build. So if you guys don't have the chance of shock on the weapons, you can go with the particular chest will provide you with chance of shock. So in this sense, this is a much cheaper version using just 2 of the set rings. Compared to previously, you will be using a third eye and also try to craft additional FXs onto those. Now of course, the downside of this particular setup is that although you'll be gaining additional ward, your damage will be much lower. And in comparison to the previous setup, it is a much cheaper startup, and this can still push for up to 3000 corruption, but with many deaths after 1500 corruption. So this setup will be ideal for 1000, maybe 1500 corruption, but beyond that, you might want to switch into the previous setup. Now other than those rings, which are the cheaper upgrades of the previous warding build, we're also gaining additional mana and also mana regen through using potions. So if we're briefly coming over to the skills, you can see that the Swift skill over here has been adjusted to have Emergency Flask. Now this is by far optional choice, guys. If you don't like this one, you can unperk this one and also gain more mana as you swift around. But for me, what I was doing is, as I was swifting, I will be using potions automatically. So this together with additional mana gain from Swift and also additional mana gain from using potions coming from the experimental build provide us with a little more mana. Because we cannot get enough mana regen onto those set items, this is one of the ways to compensate for this for a cheaper version. Now in terms of the rest of the skills and also the setups, not much has changed in terms of the idols. In terms of the blessings, we went for more defensive with more void resistance, all resistance, armor and also cold resistance. You can go with physical resistance or other resistance if you find your resistance a little lower. And similarly over here, you can adjust the increased health and also cold resist into the resistance you are missing. So this is a rough version of the setup. And ideally, it should be a little cheaper compared to the previous setup, which was using legendary items which require crafting and also legendary potential. Now coming over to our boss slaying setup. So what you might see in the replays is that we're currently using a different setup that changes the entire marksman into a super glass cannon. And if you haven't seen the previous video, we touch into that in much more details. So the Eye of Rain will allow us to have so many stacks of increased critical strike multiplier that I was getting about 300 close to 400 stacks, and this gives us tons of bonus damage. Together with Swifting, which is a mobility traversal spell, we'll be getting 3 times the value onto the Julia Strando, those particular rings. This is amazing for bursts of damage against the boss. Now we have made some adjustments, and the static shell can be one of the additional damage that we can provide to our build. Together with crafting increasing damage while wielding daggers and also wielding a sword, you can be doing even more damage. Now during this time, I do want to mention that if you come back over here, if you're unable to get chance of applying shock onto your weapons, you can exchange the chest over here into a chest over here, and this can still work. But as for the downside, you'll be losing more warding gain of course. But I do think it is cheaper to get this static shell into a legendary 3 potential if you can find it. Actually, it's not that cheap. It is still 2 legendary potential for most of the cases. So for the chances that you guys are adjusting for additional shock chances, you can use this particular chest. And this chest can be even more helpful against the boss for a bit more damage boost. Now in terms of the rest of the gears for the boss lane, what you're gonna see is one of the ways we're getting lower mana cost reduction is through shifting, and once we shift it, we'll be gaining additional mana cost reduction onto those rings. Now one thing I want to highlight, you actually don't need to have a tier 5 on those rings. You just need tier 1, which will provide you with a -3 mana cost reduction. Because all the way from tier 1 to tier 5, it is -3, and we do not need throwing damage. So in that sense, it is better for me to show you guys this way so that you don't have to craft the highest and also the most expensive items. Just having those stats onto those rings will be amazing. And in combination with having 6 mana cost reduction onto one of the daggers you're using, and also together having those boots and also standing still, you'll have 2 more mana cost reduction coming from those boots. Which in combination with all the offensive gears we're using, we can take down the boss super fast. And you can see even for the gloves, I decided to go with mana gain, mana regen in the implicit, and also additional dodge chances, throwing attack speed, additional mana, and also chance to apply more debuffs. Now in terms of the idols for the boss lane build, you can go for as many offensive idols as you can. You don't have to worry about the resistance because we're hoping we dodge the first attack. In terms of the blessings, we're going with all the offensive blessings to give us the highest damage. Now coming over to our raid plays and also some guides and some tips on clearing over 3000 corruption. So the first thing you want to notice with the ward gain or any of the setup is that you want to avoid face tanking enemies in the higher corruption guys. Yes, even though we're trying to build for more survivability, you want to avoid face tanking enemies. And in order to do so, you can swift away from the enemies. And together with using potions to get more mana, you can be dealing damage as a ranged character. It is quite important also to avoid ground effects and also poisons, which can kill you within less than a second. Now in terms of fighting the boss, it is ideally guys, you want to use a boss slaying setup. It is quite important that you have some of the items. You do not need all of the legendary potential on those items. Just the essential ones like increased melee critical chance and also increased throwing attack speed, or even having the throwing mana cost reduction will be very important. And against the boss, you want to be ready to swift into the boss whenever the boss is spawned, and then I cast my dark shot to have even greater increased damage. And during this time, I also automatically pop the potion for more mana regen because of the passives. Now for the next 3 seconds, this is where you deal the most damage. And my potato computer could not handle the lag. So here what I want to show you guys is I have over 300 stacks of Eye of Ring, which provide me with over 1500 critical strike multiplier. And what you might notice is I swift again when I could. And this is actually quite important for me to dodge the boss's one-shot mechanic. And this allows me to dodge one of the biggest hitting attack from the boss and then followed by taking down the boss. Now during this time, I realized during the testing, I actually did not have all the points associated to my skills, simply because I was swapping daggers. So the damage could be even higher during this replay. Now you might be wondering, why are you swifting all the time? Well, because against the boss, you get 3 times the stats on the rings if you swift as a traversal skill. Now if you come over to the passive traits for swift, what you can notice is we auto use the potions, and also after swifting, we'll be getting additional dodge rating depending on our dexterity. Now even though our build does not have the highest dexterity, having those dexterity can make the difference against the boss. So here what you can see is I will try to swift before the boss casts a massive spell. And here I was lucky enough to dodge it with higher dodge rate. And this allows the glass cannon build to take down the boss super fast and provide us with even more damage. Now let me just show you guys a demonstration for the cases where you just don't have enough damage against the boss. And this could happen as well. So this will take some execution and also attempts. And yes, my potato computer could not handle the lag. And you can see over here, I did not swift a second time. And this is the reason I died against the boss. So those are some good tips for you guys for the higher level corruptions and also against bosses that you want to one-shot very quickly, because we went all glass cannon for this particular build. Now what I do now is I'll provide you guys with these replays of multiple testings and also make sure you guys use the timestamps for different part of the replays and also testings. And yes guys, those are offline testings which allows us to try multiple items and also different variations of the build. Now there may be a chance that you see the items to be a little different to the builder's guide, and that is okay as well, because after more testings we decide to optimize those items and also make it cheaper for you guys so you don't have to go with 3 legendary potentials on most of the items. Now if you guys find my videos and also guides helpful and also want to support my passion in making more guides and also more videos for the last Epoch and also more games to come like Path of Exile, please consider joining me on Patreon, and also here I have created my Ko-Fi page. You can also support me directly through donations, but supporting me continuously with one of those memberships will mean a lot for my future updated videos and to become financially sustainable so I can be continuing making videos for you guys and doing what I love the most, and that is to share and also teach our communities as I dive into different games and making more guides for you guys. And as you guys are going to see in the future, I'll have different ranks and also perk advantages and also special events and also special features for members like account reviews, perfecting the build for you guys, and also co-op time play, and also even special future videos for you guys on your special build for different members.
Close.